Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. This episode is all about ice drinks. Now, summer is just around the corner and spring is in full swing, and an ice beverage can be refreshing. Now, in this episode, we go through a few different brewing methods that you can use to make a tasty iced beverage right at home. And if you stick till the end, Sergi shares a custom iced coffee drink that he created that's based on cold brew, and it is a tasty one. So stick around for the end. But anyways, let's get into this. Friends, you guys know what time it is. It's time to pour some batch brew. So let's pour some batch brew.
Dude, super efficient, quick intro.
Come on. Every single podcast episode, with maybe the exception of one or two, we kick off the episode with drinking some batch brew, talking about what we're drinking right now, and all that good stuff. Because this is a coffee podcast, so you expect
should be drinking coffee with it, right?
Yes, sir. Oh, dude, even on the aromas, it's too hot.
I know this coffee.
The aroma is just so.
I know this,
and it's too fresh. It's way too fresh off roast. Yeah. But wow, the aroma just hit me before I even sipped anything. So
this is an unreleased coffee, right?
Yes, sir.
You know what's funny is that it's very similar to the Wilton coffee that we released. Mm-hmm. It's Wilton or Will? Am I pronouncing it? Wilton? Yeah. But it's also distinctly different.
Yeah.
There's a nice Venn diagram of flavor on this coffee.
Still a little too fresh. You can. There's like this taste, this something on the tongue.
Yeah.
There's
slightly metallic.
Yeah.
Kind of.
But there's still some decent flavor coming through. Mm-hmm. What are you picking up on this batch?
I think mango is like a big one for sure. I'm trying to think because you and I have talked about this coffee too much, and I'm trying not to think of the bias of like strawberry limeade that we talked about, raspberry lemonade kind of thing. Like
I think there's like that raspberry.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming through very nicely.
I agree.
It has some similarities to the Wilton coffee that we just dropped, and if you haven't picked up a bag, I'd highly recommend you to, especially if you like coffees that are a little more, exciting, maybe a little bit of process on there. It's gonna make your caps literally taste like raspberry milk, strawberry milk. Which actually we might talk about in this episode later down the line. But go pick up a bag of that if you haven't. Otherwise, this coffee though, I actually prefer this coffee over that other one, just because to me it's just a much cleaner flavor profile. It's also not. I'm not gonna say that it's not as punchy.
No, it's equally punchy. Mm-hmm.
You think it's equally as punchy? I think it's a little less punchy, a little more delicate.
I see what you mean. I think it's just it's different. It's very much so different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so.
And let me asterisk what I mean by punchy. I'm talking about vibrancy. Mm-hmm. I think they have different punch but similar vibrancy.
Okay. Different punch,
but similar vibrancy.
Punch, and can we say that that's like intensity?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like when you're editing, hard. Dude, when we're editing photos, you know what I mean? Is this saturation or vibrancy? Which one do you like? Overly saturated or overly vibrant?
That's true.
Yeah, and I think that's what I mean, because I think the other coffee, you do taste that classic processing, the thermal shock finish on it, the carbonic maceration on it. You're tasting all of those classic flavors that you expect from those coffees. Mm-hmm. This coffee actually tastes more true to its varietal.
Yep.
It tastes like a pink bourbon.
Yes.
But it has a dynamic vibrancy and a range to it that makes it, for me, the first thing I think is like, whoa, for a quote unquote washed coffee, this is super punchy.
Right.
That's what I mean,
Sure. But Sergi convinced me.
That's language. So it's just language. Yeah.
I'm digging it. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
This coffee I'm probably gonna drink a lot once we release it and start roasting it more, even though we already have. This is a Colombian coffee coming to you from the Gasca brothers. If you've been around, you've probably seen them come up here and there. Some notable roasters have carried them. Just very good, very good. And I'm enjoying what's in the cup. So
Sick.
Cool. Well, this episode we're diving into some iced coffees, and because I guess Gen Zers are obsessed with iced coffee.
Yeah.
Like, an increasing in popularity. So I'm like, I don't know, what's this iced coffee thing about? Like, I don't think iced coffee is better than hot coffee, but
Same.
On the other hand, sometimes it just hits. Sometimes it's just what the soul craves. And honestly, though, if you're, I keep saying this on the podcast, if you're traveling and you're in an airport and Starbucks is the only thing, and you just want that caffeine, that good bean juice, I like getting an iced beverage because it feels like it tones down the intensity of like over roasted coffee that I don't like.
At a Starbucks, yeah.
And it makes it a little bit more enjoyable. So that's a big one. Sometimes, like if I'm, like I wouldn't even say like Woods here local. I wouldn't say that they're over roasted. They're just a little bit more developed than your light roasts. Still can be pleasant, but man, when I'm in doubt and want like a milk-based beverage, probably not going to order a hot milk-based beverage, but a nice one, and it's just pleasant. So I think there's some flavor experiences that are unique to the iced beverage. That makes sense, but
yeah. I mean, I don't want to bring up our running podcast joke of Dane Good coffee, but I was not. I was not getting a hot beverage from Dane Good coffee. I was getting classic iced mocha. And you're right, because there are certain things about ice drinks that the reason I think you and I don't gravitate towards an ice drink is because we love to taste coffee for what it is. Correct. Just coffee, coffee alone. Coffee and water, you know what I mean? And that's all it is, and that's what we want. That's our preference and desire. And I find that a lot of the times iced beverages tend to lean more as using coffee as an ingredient. So that's a few things that I want to unpack. I don't think one is, worse than the other. I think there's still such a thing as ice pour overs. Like for a while, remember the popularity of like the Yama slow drip cold brews? Like
yes,
what I mean? Those big towers, like all of that. Like I think ice beverages and the uniqueness of how people prepare them is also very interesting to me. And that also makes sense why, that drinking iced coffee predominantly with milk, with cream, is growing rapidly within Gen Z, quicker than any other generation that is. And I think that also has to do with how we used to consume coffee back in the day. Diner mug, drip at home, and that's evolved into the Starbucks era, into the era now that we're like, oh, okay, interesting. You can have a specialty crafted beverage that still tastes really good. Like when the iced cortado pops that narrative, it goes off. Right? The iced cortado is a very small, tasty, fits the specialty third wave model of drink creation.
Iced cortado, what the heck? That's wild. I don't know if I've ever had it there.
Really?
I've had the shaken. You guys had iced cappuccino, is that correct?
Yeah.
The iced cappuccino is great.
But the iced cappuccino is not shaken.
No. Okay. Well then.
I think you've had an iced cortado.
Maybe I have. I don't know. But that's wild. That's a very small drink for a nice beverage.
Yeah. But I mean, it's technically the same amount of milk, same amount, like ratios are the same. But when you shake it up, it's a little bigger of a drink. It turns into a 6 ounce. Okay. Technically 5-6 ounce.
Then maybe I have had it.
You have had it.
I have had it. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Actually, this is like a side note, but the interesting to see like Starbucks go after the cortado. Very interesting move. And I actually respect that they played it off with a little bit of flavor in there. You can get it plain, but then with a little bit of flavor, and they made it a little fun. It's very interesting. Yeah. Like, I know I'm talking a lot about Starbucks for one podcast episode already, but again, not what I like to drink, but there's some interesting stuff that they're doing. Yeah. And so, which, I mean, they also do their iced drinks.
They coined frappuccinos, right? Yeah. I'm gonna admit on the podcast, like I was for a while, I had a frap era, and it was fine. Will I ever go back? No. But the double, dude, how many times did you and I as kids drive through and grab a, double chocolate chip iced frappuccino? Don't you remember those days, dude? Soccer practice?
Yeah, no, just like 1,000 calories, no big deal or something.
Replace the meal, dude. Post workout. No. Anyway, but yeah, that's one of the things I think it'll be fun to unpack in this episode. And with that said, one of the main things that I hear when people go into a specialty shop, like a prominent, like light roast shop, is they're probably going to try to ask if they want an ice drink. They're probably going to try to ask for a ice pour over. And I used to get that a decent amount. Don't really do them that much. But I think ice pour overs, there's an intrigue around ice pour overs, because you can actually brew them fairly well. But I think there's also a lot of pros and cons and why they're not my drink of choice, but why I would say if you want an iced coffee, that's a very, very good order to make. And one of those things is, I know, what's that one, especially in competition, in filter and both espresso, chilled beverages are a big deal. And that idea of using the little ball, the steel ball, to chill your espresso or your pour over. The Paragon, is it, right? One of those steel balls. Yes. And I think the major reason that works is what we crave in hot coffee that we don't always get in iced coffee, is when the coffee either gets cooled or diluted. If it's done incorrectly, it tends to lose those volatile flavors. And things like the Paragon help retain those flavors. But again, it's another device, another tool, it's another gear thing that I think is super beneficial to brewing. It might not always be, in your kitchen. Like, I don't have a Paragon. Do you have a Paragon? I played around with those things, but we don't have those things.
Right.
So I think one of the things that I've been tweaking on an ice pour over was I add the ice into the carafe. Instead of pouring coffee, like brewing coffee, hot coffee, and then pouring it over ice, I ice into the carafe. So it does kind of retain a little bit of those volatiles. At the end of the day, what we want is we want to retain the volatile flavors that are in hot coffee and somehow maintain them in iced coffee so that it tastes similar, just not a piping hot beverage when it's 100 degrees outside. So I've been actually, I'll share my recipe for that. My recipe for an ice pour over is 21 grams of coffee in, which I do similar for a hot pour over. And instead of going to a 340-ish grams of coffee, like water, like I do for a regular pour over, I'm going to basically a 1 to 10. So 200 grams of water. Brewing the same water temp, usually the same water. What I change is in my pulsing, I do 100-gram bloom for 1 minute to 1:15. Massive bloom, because it's like that's 21. That's almost a 1 to 5. So I do that bloom, let it sit. It drips straight onto ice. But if you look at it, it's not like I didn't mention this. I put about 100 grams of ice for this recipe into the carafe. But because the dripper, and especially if you can use a carafe that's a little smaller, what it does is the connection between the brewer and that ice is less. So again, it's helping, similar to the steel ball, it's helping trap those volatile flavors. Or the volatile compounds. So what happens is my dilution isn't happening all at once, and it's just slowly cooling down over the ice. Do you see what I mean? Do you see the picture? Like it's dripping onto the ice and dripping down instead of just cooling it down and melting it like that. So it helps with preserving the flavor that you want. So 100 grams, then my second pulse is another 100 grams up to 200. And usually my total brew time is about 2:30. So I'm brewing like a strong concentrate that then is diluted over a shorter period of time over ice. And I think one of the things, especially I've been recently brewing our Ethiopian coffee. I don't think we have that online anymore. We sold out of it, but I had some left over and I've been brewing that. And what I find intriguing is because our Ethiopian coffee has a lot of those floral characteristics in it. This recipe helped preserve those light, kind of airy flavors in the cup. So it makes for a way different experience than what you and I are probably used to, or most people are used to in a iced beverage. It's not like quote unquote heavy bodied. You can have a delicate, clean kind of tea-like cup through doing this recipe. Big rant. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really thought about iced coffee and connecting that with that Paragon, the cold steel balls, but that's a very interesting correlation, because now that I think about it, I'm like, that's supposed to work pretty much the same way, but you probably, the only downside is like you're not cooling it with the Paragon steel balls. You're not cooling it completely. You're just cooling it a little bit, so you get it, maybe not at the 204 degrees that you're brewing it at. It's dropped a little bit, but you're not also getting cold. Yeah. So I feel like you're probably getting more flavor there. But that's an interesting correlation, because there's probably is some pros in there that I haven't really thought about. If you're doing did you say you're doing 21 grams, 100 grams of ice, and 21 grams with how much water?
200.
200.
So approximately 1 to 10, right under 1 to 10.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And 230 brew time?
Yeah.
That's all over extracted?
No.
I
go fairly fine on it, because one because your contact time,
you have to get some decent TDS.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, your water, because you're melting ice. Yeah. You're pretty much then at that point might get a weak coffee or a watered down coffee, but that's the challenge also with ices, because
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why the whole idea of what the Paragon steel iced little ball thing does is it's trying to cool down the coffee without creating a lot of dilution, but then also how it cools down. Like if you think about it, that little device that they made, they have a stand for it. The ball is held on this ring, but then you can adjust the height of your dripper on it. The height on your dripper really does matter, because you don't want the volatile compounds to basically evaporate. You want them to go in your brew and be preserved in that concentrate. So that's why a lot of the times, like, why do we not like iced coffee is because it tastes almost one-dimensional, tastes dull. Yeah. Right? Especially if you're just getting like we'll talk about other brew methods, but if you're getting specifically a just classic iced coffee black, it doesn't have the complexity that we're always looking for. Correct. And that's why brewing over ice instead of diluting, I think, is the preference. And with that little concept of the Paragon ball, it actually helps with preserving all this volatility. That makes sense.
You did tell me about this iced batchy.
Yes, on the Aiden.
This is some kind of revelation to me.
Yeah.
What do you is this a similar concept just scaled up for the batch brewer, or what?
Basically. Yeah. Okay. For both of those, it's very much so like I'm still trying to do a 1 to 10 ratio. But the Aiden allows you, the smallest dose it allows you to do is or a smallest ratio is 1 to 14. So I make slight modification. I set up my recipe. I just created I don't know what I called it, like a cold coffee recipe thing on there. Went 1 to 14 and 300 ml of water. But when it tells me to add, like, I think 26-ish grams of coffee, I just bump that up to 30.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I just make my own modification. The machine does its thing. It's still going to do it great. Yeah. Adjust the bloom, set all of those parameters. I'm brewing at a classic 3 pulse on it for 300. And I believe it's a 25-second in between pulses with 95 Celsius degree water. Okay. And putting 150 grams of ice into the carafe. Okay. So one thing because both you and I didn't mention this on the pour over thing, small little mistake to avoid. I rinse the filter on the Aiden with putting everything in. So I put the basket with the filter in the carafe. So I rinse it and it drips through. So if you're doing that with hot water, realize that the carafe is going to be hot. And if you're going to add ice, it's going to it's going to melt the ice instantly. So what I would recommend if you're doing an ice brew, actually do not rinse your filter through into the carafe. Rinse it separately, put it in, and then actually add some ice and cold water into your carafe, swirl it around, cool down the carafe quite a bit.
Interesting.
Add the ice and then do the brew.
Yeah.
That'll really help with making sure that it doesn't dilute quick enough.
And you're not, just to clarify, Sergi's not using the cold brew function on the Aiden, which actually somebody commented on a video, I believe it was Colby. She asked if we've ever used the cold brew method on the Aiden, and we haven't. So this is Sergi just using a hot recipe that he created, but with a little bit of modification, and just some ice in the carafe, and results are great.
Great. This is if I have to drink iced coffee, like if there's this hankering, like we're having another one of those Pacific Northwest heat, flashes going on. I can't drink a hot, which never happens. But I am going with my Aiden recipe. One, again, if you think about what iced coffee is, like everything that we've discussed about it, I want it to have some punch. Like I want it to have some quote unquote texture on it. I think a lot of the times what you do lose in a pour over is it does taste too tea-like. So what I liked about my brew, I did one today, is that it actually had the texture I want, the mouthfeel I want on it. And it also had like the aromas I want. Like I opened the thing, swirled it around, and I was pleasantly surprised with how much aroma I got out of that in comparison even to my filter. So it had the aromas that I want in the coffee. It preserved those, but it also had good like viscosity, good body on it. It had all of the things that I wanted, and it had way more balance, I think, than my filter recipe. Maybe I need to tweak my filter recipe, but that's usually been my go-to. So
yeah, before we get into the cold brew aspect of iced coffee, we haven't talked about coffee selection yet. And I think that's a big deal.
Yes.
Because I don't know, we haven't talked about this, but I tend to, with iced coffees, lean towards coffees that are a little more processed, or a little more heavier and punchier in flavor profile. Yep. So like a delicate washed, just ultra light geisha is probably not the right coffee. Yep. Because it's you're gonna sacrifice on flavor. It's gonna it's gonna taste watery. It's gonna taste bland, because a lot of those volatile flavors are getting lost. But if you get a coffee that's like a natural process, or maybe an anaerobic wash that has some nice punch to it and intensity, those coffees tend to actually be very pleasant and refreshing. In anything, like in an iced coffee, like an iced cappuccino, an iced latte, they're gonna punch with an iced filter, because they just have so much that you can still lose some flavor in the process, but you're still getting something coming through. So that's my 2 cents. I was actually just in California and stopped by a cafe in Sacramento. It's called Burnside Coffee, and they had a whole menu of they had like a freezer stash. They freeze almost all of their coffees. A very interesting model. Massive menu on, but a lot of them were kind of heavily process driven coffees. And it's something interesting. Like when I ordered I got a cappuccino, and with one of the heavier processed coffees, I think it was actually a co-ferment.
Whoa!
I know,
really?
I know. And then that was not for me. I was creating an experience for somebody who doesn't know that. But anyways, and the owner, Bob, shout out to Bob. He brought out alongside of it an iced cappuccino. They're nice. Like shaken iced cappuccino, and I was like, interesting. And his theory was like, hey, you should just try these side by side. And he's like, what I've noticed is with iced coffees, the flavor just comes through much more than a hot coffee. And I was like, that's a very interesting theory. Like, I don't know if I would entirely say it's better than hot coffee, but man, in an iced coffee, it tasted very interesting. Just like, it's cool, it's refreshing, but man, the flavor is still coming through. You're getting a lot of fruit. Of course, it was a co-ferment, so but Yeah, that's what I would recommend. Like if you're still looking for some flavor, get something that naturally just has a lot of punch. That's not hard to brew. So
yeah, I would 100% agree. That's definitely the side that I would lean on, is if I had to choose an iced coffee, I choose something heavy on the processing. Now, the other side of that is if you're just looking for the classic, like heavy bodied, like bigger, then choosing a almost like light to medium Guatemalan coffee would just hit, because similar to you describing like a heavily processed coffee, that you're losing some of the things and the volatile flavors, that it actually tastes quote unquote palatable. Like if it's a co-ferment, like some co-ferments for us are like way too punchy and sometimes hard to consume, but the ice version of it makes it palatable. When it comes to a light to medium Guatemalan coffee on iced, what it does is it just has a pleasant, and I'm referencing to it as a pleasant one-dimensional flavor. So it just kind of tastes round, quote unquote sweet. And especially if you're doing it to add cream or sugar to create a beverage out of it, not just a coffee drink, then I think that would also be one way I would lean if that was the case. And that's what leads me to like talking about cold brew, because you and I, we sell a lot of cold brew. We make a lot of cold brew. We've talked about doing an RTD version of one of our cold brews when we had that whoosh whoosh from Ethiopia that blew us away on cold brew. It tasted like plum juice, like in the best way possible. Super yummy. And we're like, dude, do we need to go into the RTD side of business and like just can this? And there is a concept too. I don't drink a lot of them, but I sometimes like to pop a little can. Like last time I was at Soloway in Chicago, I tried their RTD cold brews and they were delicious. They hit the spot for exactly what I was looking for, right? And again, those coffees, when we're brewing them, I usually like, especially knowing who's going to serve them, how they're going to serve them, I usually like to find a coffee that has enough acidity, not maybe super complex acidity, but enough acidity to complement the bigness and the roundness of what you expect in a cold brew drink without it tasting like liquid tar, And a lot of the times, especially with my cafe experience, the reason people want cold brew is they're actually looking to have less acidity. They're looking to have something a little more mellowed out and just like almost like an ingredient. And that's why I think cold brew coffees are very good to use as a base ingredient for creating a summer or spring iced beverage. That's when I think about cold brew, that's what I think about the role that it fits. One of our clients actually uses our cold brew for a what's it called? Espresso martini. Yeah. Is it an espresso martini? No. But the concentrate of our coffee goes a long way. I just, they have 2 taps and I just dropped off 2 sets of cold brew. Yeah. I actually did our last few batches of our Ethiopia Natural for their, single origin cold brew that they're just serving. It's fun. It's a little complex, but it's not too crazy. And my recipe allowed for that. And then I used another coffee that we had, a more developed roast, like light to medium roast, for their espresso martini keg. And the other thing is the way you and I brew cold brews, we actually do a hot bloom or a 130 degree bloom. And I've experimented with different temperatures on the bloom, and the 130 degree bloom just reveals and allows for enough curiosity that it actually it actually makes it fun and not one dimensional. When I would try a completely hot boiling bloom, especially with pouring that bloom over the coffee and not on the side. Some people pour their water around the basket, not through the basket. I pour everything through the double lined basket, and I actually have it sit for 5 minutes. It does a few things to the brew of the cold brew. One, the water that just went through the coffee and through the basket, it sits in that carafe. What is that going to do? That's going to change the overall temperature of the rest of your brew because it's warmer water at the bottom. And then when I add water, as I add by 4 liters at a time, I'm adding it again through the basket, not on the side, and agitating twice with just like a spatula spoon and stirring it quite a bit twice. So that helps enhance and extract the flavors rather than it just sitting and kind of soaking like a tea would. Yep. And then there was some research about cold brew recently released that the amount of time, like going super long, doesn't really change the extraction or the flavor. So I usually let it steep anywhere from 10 to 12 hours at room temp. That's another thing. Steeping it in a fridge or very cold temps isn't beneficial, but you're also don't wanting to steep it in a way that would create bacteria. And you want to make sure that you remove everything before or past the 12-hour mark. Right. So yeah, you make it safe. You still want to make sure that you're not like creating something that would make someone sick.
So give me a your cold brew has been probably some of the best cold brew I've tried, and it's been one of those cold brews where I'm like, okay, like I actually would not mind having this sitting in the fridge for just an occasional, because it still has like a lot of great flavor coming through. Still cold if you want it, cold on those days. But tell me, give the people one fun little beverage that they can make with a cold brew.
Yes,
a tasty cold brew. So.
For sure. One of my favorite beverages I made was this. People are gonna make fun of me, but it was in the era when Justin Bieber dropped the Peaches song, right?
Come on.
So I was like, well, what kind of inspiration can I get from this? Everyone's listening to it. It's playing all over the place. And I'm like, what is it? So it brought this idea like to make almost like a coffee lemonade with a peach, like a simple syrup. So I actually would use I'd make a simple syrup out of canned peaches, which should I share it or should we just like type it out? Because it's a very simple, it's a basic recipe. Let me pull it up here. I don't have it all the way memorized. It's very basic. 10 cups of canned peaches with the syrup. So don't strain the peaches out. Like just open the canned peach, dump it, 10 cups. 5 cups of sugar and 5 cups of water. Fairly simple recipe for this syrup. And then combine the peach, sugar, and water, bring it to a boil, and let it just break down and reduce for about 15 minutes simmering after it boils. After that, strain well, press the peaches with a wooden spoon. I usually put it through a strainer or through a food processor and strain it well. So it has like thick viscosity, but it's not like clumpy. You don't want it clumped. You want it to be strained pretty well. Transfer safe. And then when you're adding it into a drink, you add 40 grams of that peach simple. Then I add 60 grams of a lemonade concentrate. And the lemonade concentrate is also very simple. It's equal. It's a 1 part lemonade, like a lemon juice, like concentrated lemon juice, 1 part sugar, and 1 part water. Okay. So you make that lemon concentrate, and you do about 60 grams of lemonade concentrate, 90 grams of ice, so like about half a cup of ice, and you do 4 ounces of cold brew. Just spin all that around, kind of give it a good stir, and top it off with about 40, with just to the top of the cup. So if you're doing a 16-ounce cup, to the top of the cup with some seltzer water. And then a nice little peach garnish on top. Wow. And it absolutely bangs. It's sparkly, it's juicy, it's just great. It was a riff off of listening to that song enough and knowing that I actually like Arnold Palmer, like the half tea, half lemonade, and then doing that. So it's super nice. Highly recommend it. When I had it on bar, it was like a very big seller.
Wow. That sounds like way too much sugar for me.
Yeah, it's a decent amount. You got sugar in the lemon concentrate.
But if you're, if you're not like me and you like fun little beverages, that does sound great. I'm assuming you could probably come down on a little bit of that sugar if you don't want as much sugar. Yeah. It's just probably not going to taste as intense.
Yeah, I would. But there's definitely a lot of room to shift, right? Yeah, to adjust. Because you're using like lemon, like concentrate, which has a lot of acidity. It's very punchy. So, but there's sugar in it, so you can adjust that sweetness in ratio to your peach sweetness. Yes. Like how peachy do you want it to be?
Yeah. Maybe we should just make a video.
That'd be a fun
of just creating like something standalone.
Yeah.
That would actually, we should actually make a few, like a series of some fun. But cool. I think that's a wrap for this episode. Any final thoughts for the folks about iced coffee?
It has its place. It can be yummy, but probably not my go-to drink. Oops.
Yep. Fair. Yeah. Same. But don't write it off completely. And if you want something refreshing, there's a way to do it pretty good, pretty well, and a way to do it in a way that's kind of bland. So there it is, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode all about iced coffees. Thank you so much for listening. And as we always say, remember, reflect what's good.